Kirk Douglas was a famous movie star for more than 60 years. People loved him because he was brave in his movies, had a strong personality, and everyone thought he was a good guy. But when he got really old, some people said he told someone a secret about another famous actress named Natalie Wood. This secret was so scary that it could change how people remember both of these stars forever. Did this old movie star finally tell the truth about something bad he had been hiding? Or are people just making up stories that will hurt his memory? The real story will shock everyone, even the people who knew them best. Kirk Douglas was born with the name Isur Daniel on December 9, 1916 in a place called Amsterdam, New York. His parents came from Russia and were Jewish, and they didn't have much money to take care of their family in America. Growing up poor made him really want to succeed, and he finally got a scholarship that let him learn acting. This early need to make something of himself helped him become bold on movie screens and work really hard. In 1941, when there was a big war happening around the world, Douglas joined the U.S. Navy to help his country. He worked as a lieutenant junior grade during World War II. Being in the military always stayed important to him, and it taught him how to be disciplined and be a leader. After he finished serving in 1944, Douglas set his mind on going back to Hollywood, ready to make a name for himself among all the other young actors trying to make it big. 2 years later, in 1946, Douglas made his first movie called The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. It was a drama that right away showed how intense and commanding he could be on screen. The people who made movies and the audiences both noticed him, feeling like they were seeing a really powerful new movie star being born. By 1949, everyone knew for sure when he got his big break playing a role in Champion, where he played a mean boxer who cared more about winning than being a good person. This performance got Douglas his first chance to win an Academy Award for Best Actor, and made everyone know he was one of Hollywood's most daring new stars. The way he acted was different from what people expected and showed he wasn't afraid to play complicated characters who weren't always good. This choice would make his reputation during what people call Hollywood's golden time. The early 1950s saw Douglas get even more famous in amazing ways. In 1952, he gave another performance that could have won him an Oscar in The Bad and the Beautiful, playing a sneaky movie producer whose need to succeed showed that Douglas knew about the movie business's darker secrets. Instead of taking easy, heroic roles, he chose to play characters with sharp edges and problems. 4 years later, he brought the artist Vincent van Gogh to life in Lust for Life in 1956. He showed the painter's genius and pain in a way that felt very real. This brave performance got him another Academy Award nomination, proving again that he was a powerful actor who wouldn't play it safe. These bold artistic choices put Douglas in the same group as Hollywood's best dramatic actors, and made directors who wanted performers who could carry psychologically deep stories want to work with him. In 1957, Douglas took another big artistic chance by starring in Paths of Glory, an anti-war movie directed by the young Stanley Kubrick. The movie was controversial because it didn't hold back in criticizing military leaders and how brutal war could be, and Douglas being in it showed he was willing to use his fame to push movie boundaries. His fierce acting as a good colonel fighting corruption in the French army showed how much he cared about making people think with his movies. Just 3 years later in 1960, Douglas would help shape Hollywood history even more with his most famous role and boldest political act, producing and starring in Spartacus. At a time when Hollywood had a blacklist that had ruined many people's careers because they were accused of being communists, Douglas went against industry pressure by making sure blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo got full credit on screen. This act is widely thought to have helped break the blacklist and showed Douglas wasn't just a star, but someone with morals who would challenge the studio system. Throughout the 1970s, Douglas kept changing himself by working behind the camera, as a producer and director while still acting in movies. Movies like Scalawag, 1973, and Posse, 1975, showed he wanted creative control, and was determined to explore stories the way he wanted to. Even though these projects didn't make much money, his willingness to take risks defined him as a filmmaker who valued artistic freedom over predictable box office success. Then in 1978, Douglas almost died in a helicopter crash during a private flight, a scary experience that deeply changed how he looked at life. The crash nearly ended his career, but his determination to get better and go back to work showed the same strength that had guided him since he was a child. By 1980, Douglas had stepped into new territory again, appearing in the science fiction movie The Final Countdown, exploring ideas about time travel and military intervention. The movie reflected his ongoing interest in challenging different types of movies and his refusal to quietly retire. Years later, in 1996, the Academy honored his amazing contributions to movies with an honorary Oscar, recognizing both his artistic achievements and his deep influence on Hollywood history. Sadly, later that same year, Douglas had a serious stroke that left him partially paralyzed and made it hard for him to speak. Many people thought his career was over, but once again, he proved them wrong. Through intense therapy and pure determination, Douglas gradually got strong enough to keep appearing in movies and speaking at events, becoming an inspiration to fans around the world. In 2003, Douglas made a touching return to movies in It Runs in the Family, acting alongside his son, Michael Douglas, and his ex-wife, Diana Dill. The movie's multi-generational cast made its story of family conflict feel real, and Douglas's performance, marked by vulnerability and humor, really connected with audiences who knew about his real-life struggles. By then, his legacy was secure. He had survived war, injury, scandal, and deep personal setbacks, coming out each time with renewed strength. As he got older, Douglas gradually moved away from public life, choosing instead to focus on writing, charity work, and family. His memoirs told the story of his remarkable journey from a poor childhood to Hollywood stardom, offering honest thoughts about fame, ego, suffering, and never giving up. In 2016, Kirk Douglas celebrated his 100th birthday, an extraordinary milestone that few actors, let alone industry legends, ever reach. Tributes came in from around the world describing him as one of the last surviving actors who had witnessed, shaped, and gone beyond Hollywood's golden age. At this moment of celebration, he was honored not only for his countless iconic movie roles, but also for his principled stand against injustice, his remarkable strength in the face of near-fatal events, and his unwavering dedication to storytelling. Even after officially stopping acting, Douglas remained an influential figure, frequently mentioned by younger actors and directors as a role model for artistic courage. Kirk Douglas's life was often described as one of strength, determination, and extraordinary talent. But alongside his celebrated career came a series of controversies that made his public image more complicated. For a man who spent decades shaping the golden age of Hollywood, and who stood tall as one of its last surviving icons, Douglas was never afraid to show the world his flaws. Unlike many stars who went to great lengths to hide the less nice aspects of their lives, Douglas faced them directly, writing honestly about his choices in his own words. These revelations, particularly those in his 1988 autobiography, The Ragman's Son, painted a picture of a man who achieved greatness, but was not perfect. It was this willingness to expose his humanity, even at the risk of criticism, that ensured his life would always be discussed with both admiration and debate. One of the most shocking admissions Douglas made was about his history of having affairs. In The Ragman's Son, he openly detailed the numerous relationships he had with other women while married, naming Hollywood figures and admitting to behaviors that clashed with the traditional image of a devoted husband and father. For fans who had admired him not only for his screen presence, but also for the family image he projected, these confessions were deeply surprising. In a culture where stars often kept carefully crafted personal brands, Douglas's openness seemed almost reckless. Yet, he did not hide from the truth, presenting his affairs as part of his life story without trying to excuse or make them seem smaller. This honesty generated controversy, not only because of the affairs themselves, but also because of the blunt way he described them. Some respected his honesty, arguing that it showed courage to admit failings so publicly. Others were less forgiving, believing that his openness still did little to undo the hurt such behavior caused to his family. The tension between his iconic image and his personal choices continues to spark conversations about the double lives often lived by Hollywood stars. The controversy surrounding his personal life naturally extended into how people saw his personality on movie sets. Douglas had a reputation as one of the most committed and intense actors of his generation. But with that came a cost. Accounts from those who worked with him, documented in sources like Eric Bronson's Kirk Douglas: The Authorized Biography, often describe him as temperamental and controlling. His perfectionism pushed him to demand more from himself and those around him, sometimes raising the quality of a film, but at other times creating a tense and difficult atmosphere. For example, directors occasionally found his insistence on specific, creative choices frustrating, while co-stars sometimes felt overshadowed by his powerful presence. To his supporters, this was the mark of an artist unwilling to compromise, someone determined to deliver the best performance possible. To his critics, however, it revealed a personality that could be domineering and hard to work with. This duality reflected the same contradictions visible in his personal life. A man who inspired admiration through his talent and discipline, but also left behind stories of friction and difficulty. Douglas's role in breaking the Hollywood blacklist added yet another dimension to his legacy. In 1960, he famously gave screenwriter Dalton Trumbo full credit for his work on Spartacus, a bold move in a period when blacklisted writers were forced to work in secret due to being accused of having communist ties. At the time, his decision was widely praised as a historic act of defiance that helped bring an end to one of the darkest chapters in Hollywood's history. Douglas himself often celebrated this choice as one of the most important of his career, framing it as an example of standing up for what was right against overwhelming pressure. However, this legacy has not been without debate. Critics have argued that Douglas may have exaggerated his role in ending the blacklist, noting that director Otto Preminger also publicly hired Trumbo around the same time. Historical analyses and interviews with Trumbo's family suggest that, while Douglas played a significant part, the end of the blacklist was the result of multiple figures pushing back against an unfair system. The debate does not lessen the bravery of Douglas's choice, but it complicates the story, raising questions about how history should give credit and how personal accounts can sometimes make one's role seem bigger. Just as his involvement with the blacklist showed both courage and controversy, so too did his public statements about women draw attention. In his autobiography and in interviews, Douglas spoke candidly about his relationships, often using language that today would be considered dismissive or treating women like objects. His tendency to describe women as conquests reflected attitudes common in his time, but modern readers and critics have looked at these words through a different lens. For some, they reveal a pattern of sexism that undermines the respect he claimed to hold for women in his personal and professional life. These criticisms do not erase his achievements, but do highlight how society's views of gender and power have shifted, leading many to re-evaluate comments and behaviors once seen as acceptable. Douglas's remarks serve as a reminder of how even the most admired stars can embody the cultural blind spots of their era. For fans who grew up idolizing his charisma, the realization that he sometimes spoke of women in objectifying ways was disappointing, showing that the same man who stood up against political injustice did not always challenge the biases of his own time. Natalie Wood, born Natalie Zacharenko on July 20, 1938 in San Francisco, California, was meant for a life in the spotlight almost from the moment she could walk. Her parents, who came from Russia and believed passionately in their daughter's talent, began preparing her for stardom when she was very young. By the time she was only 5 years old in 1943, Natalie made her first movie, marking the beginning of one of the most memorable and troubled careers in Hollywood history. She quickly became a regular on American screens, standing out from other child performers with a rare blend of innocence, emotional intelligence, and camera presence that captivated both audiences and directors alike. Just 4 years later, in 1947, she landed the role that would make her famous across the nation, playing the smart Susan Walker in the holiday classic Miracle on 34th Street. With her bright eyes and natural charm, Wood captured the hearts of millions and cemented her status as Hollywood's newest child prodigy, a label that would follow her throughout her life, for better and worse. As Natalie grew from child star to young adult, her movie choices grew bolder and more complex, reflecting both her intellectual maturity and her desire to be taken seriously as an actress. In 1955, at just 17 years old, she gave a breakthrough performance in Rebel Without a Cause, alongside James Dean. Her portrayal of the troubled teenager Judy got her a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, instantly changing her image from child sweetheart to serious dramatic artist. The role showed her emotional depth and natural understanding of teenage vulnerability, earning her praise from critics and filmmakers who saw in Wood a future superstar with the potential to become one of the greats. That promise was further shown the very next year in 1956 when Wood appeared in The Searchers, one of the most iconic westerns ever made. Even in a smaller role, her presence stood out, hinting at her ability to handle vastly different types of movies with seeming ease. Wood's rise continued throughout the early 1960s, which would ultimately become the peak of her artistic success. In 1961, she delivered not one but two of the most unforgettable performances of her career. First came Splendor in the Grass, a powerful romantic drama in which she played a young woman struggling with society's expectations, repression, and heartbreak, a role that earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. That same year, she also starred in West Side Story, an adaptation of the Broadway musical that became a cultural phenomenon. Her portrayal of Maria, while controversial given debates about casting and voice dubbing, made her instantly recognizable across the globe and further solidified her place among Hollywood's most bankable leading ladies. 2 years later, Wood continued her streak of critical acclaim with a Best Actress nomination in 1963 for Love with the Proper Stranger, proving once again that she was not content to coast on her youth or beauty alone, but instead demanded respect as a skilled and dedicated performer. Throughout the rest of the 1960s and into the 1970s, Wood continued to appear in well-regarded projects that showed her versatility. She starred in Gypsy, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and a range of other films that reflected the evolving tastes of American cinema, often exploring more adult themes such as sexuality, identity, and social change. During this period, Wood also made the deliberate decision to step back from acting sometimes to focus on building her family life, marrying actor Robert Wagner not once but twice, and welcoming 2 daughters. While some critics worried that time away from the screen could slow her momentum, Wood's absences only added to her mystique, and she returned each time with fresh energy and renewed artistic purpose. Her personal life, however, remained a subject of intense media scrutiny, with her marriage to Wagner attracting headlines filled with both glamour and gossip, reflecting Hollywood's obsession with star couples and their behind-the-scenes dramas. In 1979, Wood made a triumphant return to widespread acclaim when she won a Golden Globe for her performance in the television miniseries From Here to Eternity. This victory marked her successful transition into television at a time when many film actors still viewed the small screen as a step down. Instead, Wood treated television as another artistic outlet and proved she could command just as much attention and admiration in that medium as she had in film. Her star power remained undeniable, and fans awaited her next major project with great anticipation. Tragically, however, her promising second act would never fully unfold. In 1981, while filming the science fiction thriller Brainstorm, Wood went on a weekend yacht trip near California's Catalina Island with her husband Robert Wagner, co-star Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain. What should have been a relaxing getaway turned into a devastating mystery when Wood was found drowned in the water at just 43 years old. Natalie Wood's death on that November night in 1981 remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in Hollywood history. Officially ruled an accidental drowning at the time, the circumstances surrounding her final hours were immediately the subject of intense speculation. Questions arose about what exactly happened aboard the yacht Splendor, why Wood had ended up alone in the water, and whether alcohol, argument, or foul play was involved. Over the years, conflicting testimonies, shifting timelines, and updated medical findings reclassified her cause of death from accidental to undetermined. Intriguingly, the case was reopened decades later with Robert Wagner eventually named a person of interest, though no charges were ever filed. For many fans, Wood's sudden and mysterious passing felt heartbreakingly ironic given her lifelong fear of dark water, a phobia she had spoken about in interviews. In the public imagination, Natalie Wood became not only a symbol of youthful brilliance and beauty, but also a haunting reminder of Hollywood glamour cut short under murky circumstances. Natalie Wood's marriage to Robert Wagner has long been one of Hollywood's most talked-about relationships, marked not only by glamour, but also by turbulence. The two first married in 1957, capturing public attention as one of Hollywood's golden couples, but their union quickly revealed cracks behind the scenes. By 1962, after 5 years of marriage, they divorced, citing irreconcilable differences. Yet their story did not end there. In 1972, Wood and Wagner reunited and remarried, reigniting the fascination of fans who saw their second attempt at marriage as both a romantic reunion and a gamble. However, reports and accounts that emerged later suggested their relationship remained deeply troubled. Claims of jealousy, heated arguments, and explosive fights cast a shadow over the picture-perfect image the public was often shown. These tensions would eventually be mentioned repeatedly by biographers, investigators, and the media in connection with the circumstances surrounding Wood's untimely death. What was once viewed as a glamorous Hollywood love story ultimately became a relationship forever linked to questions of tragedy and suspicion. Alongside the public drama of her marriage, Natalie Wood faced private struggles with her mental health. Though she often projected confidence on screen, those close to her revealed that she battled anxiety and insecurity throughout much of her life. Therapy sessions became part of her efforts to manage the pressures of both her personal life and her demanding career. These challenges were rarely spoken of publicly at the time, but after her death, friends and family members shared accounts that painted a fuller picture of her vulnerabilities. Among the most haunting details was Wood's intense fear of deep water. She carried this fear from childhood into adulthood, so much so that those who knew her best found it chilling that her life would end in the very waters she had always dreaded. Her struggles with fear and insecurity showed a side of her life that contrasted sharply with the confident, luminous star adored by audiences worldwide. They also underscored how, despite fame and fortune, she was not immune to the personal battles that so many people face in silence. The world of Hollywood during Natalie Wood's era added further strain to her life. Like many actresses of the 1950s and 1960s, she lived under the strict image control of the studio system. Studios managed not only her career choices, but also the details of her personal life, often creating and promoting relationships to generate publicity. Rumored romances, some real and others engineered for headlines, became part of her identity in the public eye. This pressure to maintain a flawless image was a double-edged sword. It helped secure her place as one of Hollywood's brightest stars, but it also created an environment where she was constantly scrutinized, managed, and at times exploited. Biographers have pointed to this as a reflection of the broader challenges faced by actresses of her generation, whose careers were shaped, not solely by their talents, but also by how well they conform to the industry's often unfair expectations. For Wood, the contrast between her carefully curated public image and her private insecurities created a tension that followed her throughout her career. The most tragic and enduring chapter of Natalie Wood's story came in 1981 when she drowned off Santa Catalina Island during a weekend yacht trip. On board with her that night were her husband, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern. At first, her death was reported as a straightforward case of accidental drowning, but almost immediately troubling details began to surface that made the official story harder to accept. Bruises on her body, conflicting witness statements, and inconsistencies in the accounts of what happened that night left many questions unanswered. The mysterious circumstances turned her passing into one of Hollywood's most debated tragedies, with speculation continuing for decades after. What might have been remembered as a simple accident instead became a mystery that continues to cast a shadow over her life and legacy. As time went on, the official story of Natalie Wood's death shifted. In 2011, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the case after new testimony emerged, suggesting that the events of that night required further scrutiny. The following year, in 2012, her cause of death was officially changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. This change reflected the persistent uncertainty surrounding how and why she ended up in the water, particularly given her lifelong fear of it. Then in 2018, the case took yet another dramatic turn when Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest in the investigation. While no charges have ever been filed and Wagner has consistently denied wrongdoing, the decision to name him in this way reignited public interest and speculation. For many, the unanswered questions about that night have become inseparable from the story of Natalie Wood herself, ensuring that her death remains one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. Kirk Douglas spent most of his life being celebrated as one of Hollywood's toughest heroes, a defiantly bold leading man who seemed larger than life in films like Spartacus and Paths of Glory. Yet in the years surrounding his death at 103, a far darker story began going around that he had privately admitted to a shocking deed involving fellow screen legend Natalie Wood. Though no official document or recording contains a confession, the idea that Douglas may have revealed a devastating truth in his final days spread rapidly among fans, fueled by chilling statements from Natalie's younger sister, Lana Wood. The clash between Douglas's golden public image and these disturbing claims has left Hollywood dealing with one of its most unsettling questions. Did America's most admired tough guy take a terrible secret to his grave? Natalie Wood was only 16 when she allegedly encountered Kirk Douglas in a setting that should have been a career opportunity. According to Lana Wood's memoir, Little Sister, published in 2021, their mother arranged for Natalie to meet Douglas in a private hotel suite in 1955. Believing powerful connections like his could help advance her teenager's already flourishing career, Lana claims Natalie returned home shaking and upset, eventually breaking down in tears and telling her that something deeply upsetting had happened during the meeting with Douglas. It was like an out-of-body experience, Lana quotes her sister as saying, "I was terrified. I was confused." In order to preserve Natalie's Hollywood reputation and secure future roles, Lana says their mother forced them into silence, reportedly telling Natalie, "Scream all you want. No one will believe you." The accusation remained unspoken publicly for more than 6 decades. After Lana's memoir brought the story back, some fans became convinced Kirk Douglas must have made a deathbed confession. Rumors spread across social media claiming that Douglas privately acknowledged guilt before passing away in 2020. Though none of these stories has been proven in court documents or verified media reports, what is confirmed is that Douglas never once publicly addressed Lana Wood's accusation during his lifetime, even as whispers began surfacing in the 2000s. One source of confusion stems from a 2020 Guardian column written by journalist Clive James shortly after Douglas's death. In it, James admitted that during an interview with Douglas on the occasion of his 100th birthday, someone asked if he had confronted Douglas about rumors regarding Natalie Wood. James wrote that he had not asked the question, assuming it was mere gossip, and Douglas never brought it up. Though some readers misunderstood this column as proof James had witnessed a confession, he clarified that Douglas said nothing about Natalie Wood, let alone admitted wrongdoing. Michael Douglas, Kirk's son, offered a brief but telling response. When Lana's story came out in 2021, he told Vanity Fair simply, "May they both rest in peace." To some, this statement sounded like dignified restraint. To others, it seemed like avoiding an extremely dark legacy. Fans and critics found themselves caught between two legacies, one of a screen hero who helped end the Hollywood blacklist and donated millions to charity, and another of a man accused of having brutally violated a teenage co-star and concealed it for the rest of his life. The controversy became even more tangled once historians pointed out just how guarded Kirk Douglas was about his private life in his later years. After suffering a severe stroke in 1996, Douglas struggled to speak clearly and rarely gave unfiltered interviews without family present. He devoted much of his retirement to charity work, memoir writing, and public events where he was celebrated as an elder statesman of Hollywood. He wrote multiple autobiographies, most notably The Ragman's Son, in which he admitted to numerous consensual affairs with famous actresses, yet never hinted at anything involving Natalie Wood or any non-consensual encounter. Supporters argue that he had every opportunity to unburden himself in his own published writings if he were haunted by such a crime, and his silence should not automatically be taken as guilt. Lana Wood, however, remains firm in her belief. In a 2021 People magazine interview, she insisted, "I didn't write the book to hurt anyone who had passed, but because Natalie never got justice. She told me what he did. I believe her." In response to skeptics who question why Natalie herself never came forward while alive, Lana points to the entrenched studio system of the 1950s. Powerful male stars were heavily protected, while young actresses were often warned that speaking out could ruin their image, their contracts, or their families. With Natalie's career taking off at the time, including Academy Award nominations and starring roles in West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause, the pressure to remain silent would have been overwhelming. Lana believes Natalie carried that trauma quietly for years, which may have contributed to the emotional struggles she faced before her mysterious death in 1981.